Joining me now is the Labour MP, Ian Murray.
Good morning.
Ah, there you are. Sorry, I'm having difficulty finding people this morning, Ian Murray, but I have eventually found you.
I'll try not to move.
All right. Now, Keir Starmer has just suggested to Andrew Marr that Labour might vote for the Boris Johnson's deal should there be an amendment saying it should be put to a referendum. Does that seem to you sensible, with an option to remain?
Well, that's always been the compromise that we've been putting forward. We've always said that the former Prime Minister and the current Prime Minister's deal, we would allow that to pass Parliament as long as it went back to the people for a final say. That seems to be the compromise that would get this moving forward and break the impasse in Parliament. Right.
Ian Blackford, he didn't say that the SNP wouldn't do that, but he didn't seem very clear that they would. Does that surprise you?
Well, the SNP have gone slightly cold on a people's vote. It wasn't mentioned at their conference last week in any of the leaders' speeches, including Ian Blackford's, and they didn't use their amendment yesterday to push for a people's vote where we did. So I don't know what the position of the SNP is on a people's vote at the moment, but I would have thought, given what they've said in the past, that if this amendment comes forward, they would support it, and I would hope they would wholeheartedly support the Remain campaign.
Yeah, they said, Ian Blackford said they would support the amendment, but not necessarily then vote for the withdrawal bill.
Well, that's contradictory, because what you would then do is if you had an amendment passed on the withdrawal bill and then voted the bill down, you wouldn't have that amendment. So the whole principle of a people's vote would therefore fall. If you have an amendment to a bill that says that we will allow this to pass, that as long as it goes back to the people for a final say, then to vote the bill down would be to vote that amendment down. So that doesn't make sense.
Ian Blackford also suggested that there should be a vote of no confidence the moment that it becomes clear that the EU has granted an extension and that therefore no deal, crashing out with no deal, is impossible. Do you agree with that?
Well, the way that you would want to schedule these things in is we don't quite know what's going to happen next week yet, but let's just say we do get the withdrawal bill on Tuesday. As Keir Starmer has said, amendment will go down to say that we would have a confirmatory vote with the option to remain. If that then passes, what we would want to do is to have that referendum. Hopefully we would win that referendum in terms of remain and then have a general election. I think we've got to get the Brexit issue off the table first, and if we're able to win that amendment on the bill, we certainly wouldn't want to risk the fact of having a referendum between now and the 31st of January to try and get this settled forever. So I think
so
it's
as far
right
as
to
you're
have a
concerned,
referendum
vote of no
first.
confidence is out the window. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think if you want to sequence these things properly, what you would do now, because the government's in charge of the process here, you would want to have the extension in place. The letter's been written, although petulantly not signed. That extension goes into the 31st of January. The bill comes on Tuesday. Hopefully we get an amendment down that's passed for a confirmatory vote with the option to remain. Let's have that referendum. Hopefully that means we're able to stay in the European Union, take Brexit off the table, and then go to a general election. I think that's a sequencing that's good, not just for the country, but also is sensible in terms of trying to win this battle.
Right. Now, the criticism of Labour is that there's a fundamental, almost lack of confidence in your position. I mean, Keir Starmer and others go on about how in the political declaration they don't think the guarantees and things like workers' rights or the environment are strong enough. But isn't the fundamental point here, Labour should just back Boris Johnson's bill, and if there's a general election and you really are confident you'll win it, you can negotiate whatever you like with the European Union. You can stay in the customs union, you can keep European environmental standards and agree to update as the European Union does. It's as if in Labour's position there's a fundamental lack of confidence that you can actually become the government, so you're seeking to tie the hands of a future Tory government.
Well, there's risks in all of this, isn't there? And the key thing here at the moment is we have to deal with what's in front of us. And what's in front of us is A, preventing no deal, B, trying to get that confirmatory vote with the option to remain so the public can have the final say, and then go to the general election. There's risks in all of this. And of course, this is a moving feast all the time. We may be in a position by the end of next week that a vote of no confidence would go in any case, because that might be the only thing that's left open to us. So let's take what's in front of us and very carefully run through the options here.
All Labour's arguments against Boris Johnson's deal seem to be about things which are not actually decided in the deal itself, but will be decided in future negotiations with the EU. So why can't Labour just back Boris Johnson's deal, have the courage of your convictions and say, well, if we become a Labour government, we'll negotiate a customs union, we'll negotiate being close to the single market, that will make the whole situation in Northern Ireland as it stands irrelevant. There's nothing to stop you saying that. So why are you against this deal?
But backing Boris Johnson's deal would mean we would leave the European Union on the 31st of October, and then there is no way back. I think the only way to settle this now is to put this back to the people and let them have the final say on this. And then, of course, if the referendum was then lost and we left on Boris Johnson's deal, then we would have a general election and the whole of the political declaration in the future is then renegotiated. So there is a key point here to make sure that we get this back to the public with what's in front of us at the moment. And the key thing from yesterday is, of course, we've been able to try and prevent no deal. The letter for the extension's gone in and hopefully that will be granted. And we'll have an opportunity next week when this bill comes forward, not only to attach a confirmatory vote, but also to call out the Prime Minister on the promises that he's making people. He's asking his hard Brexiteers to vote for this because it will mean deregulation. He's asking for Labour people to vote for this because it will have workers' rights and those consumer and environmental protections. He can't have it both ways.
We'll have to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed, Ian Murray.